Hello, friends. This is William Spencer, and it's Sunday, July 16th, 2023. I had a, I just keep having these insights, so let's see if I can put them into a meaningful monologue. A buddy of mine invited me yesterday to attend a vegan festival. And, I'm, it's funny because I'm on a keto diet right now, so it's not like I really needed anything vegan, but I thought, hey, what the heck, let's check it out. And I've kind of moved in a much more libertarian direction, or I don't even know, independent. I thought it was conservative, but I don't know. I'm not. I don't think I like conservatives all that much, and I always thought of myself as liberal. And the thing is I've had conversations recently with people who seem to have a liberal flavor to themselves, even if they are freedom advocates in relation to, say, the vaccine. But that's just a bunch of blabber. That's not the real focus of this conversation. The real focus is that I've changed, and in some ways, I could say that I was spoiled growing up, and that would be true, right? But in a way, I'm also still spoiled. Or maybe just very fortunate, because it seems like there's a core of like-minded people that I've managed to surround myself with. And the only problem with that is a failure to understand that so much of the population, I don't know, it seems like a majority of the population are not in the like-minded mindset that I'm in. And I experienced this in this visit to this vegan festival. And the main highlight of it really was a guy I really like, who was part of a men's movement project, and he still is involved with it, and I'm really not. It's called New Warrior, and it's a men's initiation, and it's about men, regardless of whether they're gay or straight, coming to terms with who they are as a man. And getting into male power, the hard, yelling, screaming, maleness of being a man. And this, what's interesting is, I guess I never realized, but that crowd is largely liberal, I guess. And I considered myself liberal. Well, a guy I really love, and I will love him to my last day. He and his girlfriend, who I'm also familiar with. And I see them around occasionally. They were at this event, and we stopped and talked to him. My buddy Darren and I, Sean is the guy we bumped into, and I don't know how to. I don't know. Well, I think I did an okay job of stating my truth without being argumentative or combative. I didn't argue with anything about his T-shirt, and his T-shirt was Obama. It was a younger picture of Obama, and I think it was one of his main slogans, but I think it was in Spanish, so I can't even remember which of Obama's slogans there were. I think what Obama was demonstrating to us, especially going into the 2008 election, I think was something that we all wanted. And he had the demeanor, the presentation of somebody who cared. At least from what I could tell, and from what I believed throughout the time of his presidency. One of the things on Sean's T-shirt said, "Best president ever." I didn't argue with it, but I guess when I really started looking into things, I realized that under Obama, the Syrian war began, the Syrian conflict. And the U.S. bombed the hell out of Syria. We did not have permission to be in Syria. And we were basically supporting rebels that were trying to overthrow the government in Syria. And one possible explanation for why we were doing that is for Syria's oil. There was a nickname that James Corbett had for Obama, Barack Obama. And, the stark truth of it, I feel like he said, we're going to be the most transparent government. And it's funny because on TNT radio, there's this guy, it's not TNT radio, it's on 21st Century Wire. There's like an ad where you hear Barack Obama saying, "We will be the most transparent government." And then you hear this friend of Patrick Henningson's on there saying, "Tired of being lied to?" And, I think that's what I ultimately came down to about Obama is like, he lied to us. But the thing is, if you're just following some sort of mainstream outlet, you may not know that, And it's wild. I see these people who have very respectable, lucrative professions who think that from their perspective, they feel like they're not listening to mainstream media if they're listening to NPR. Well, I was really proud of myself yesterday because that's what Sean said. And I said, just matter-of-factly, NPR is compromised. Because it's so easy, especially if you're hanging around, I don't know, conservatives, to start making fun of that. But that's one of our problems, is we're making fun of each other rather than listening to each other. So I was really proud of myself that I could just say NPR is compromised. And I think, and I appreciate the way Sean spoke, because I told him about my submitting my passport, seeking to go to Russia. And he said, "Well, I don't dislike Russia, I dislike Putin." Well, from that alone, you can see that Sean has a good heart, and I could see, at least there's more, maybe that's not enough for me sharing this with you to convince you, but I just know Sean's got a good heart, And he's a little more open-minded than the average American, because he doesn't just get into this Russia bashing stuff. He did say, I don't like Putin, you know? And then I asked him why, and we had a conversation, and I spoke my truth about many things, about the provocations that led to the current conflict in which Russia is in Ukraine fighting. And, you know, Sean had the dignity to say, well, I don't know, maybe you know something I don't know. Maybe, you know, maybe I'm not, you know, I got into the whole coup of 2014 and how the CIA basically has run Ukraine ever since. And I mean, and he had a degree of acknowledgement that the U.S. has been doing this to countries. You know, I just don't think, maybe perhaps he didn't know that it was happening in, you know, the U.S. was doing this in Ukraine. So I guess the whole point I'm trying to get at, and the whole reason I wanted to do this podcast, this video, is that it's really easy when you find agreement, you know, and it's really easy because I find all kinds of voices online that to me are really looking at the facts and analyzing the situations based on facts, not emotion. And then, you know, over time I've developed a cadre of analysts that I respect. And even I'm on some, what do you call them, discussions that I can participate in, or I tend to just listen to what they or read other people's comments. But there's just a lot of good critical thought out there, and so because there's so much of that, it's very, very easy to fail to realize how many people are still in a completely different place on world events, on a completely different understanding. And of course, you know, I think it's extremely important at this point to find a way to be respectful to everybody. And I think you can just say that modern life is very demanding for most people. And it's very easy to think that, you know, an outfit like NPR is getting into the depth of things and giving you the truth. They're going in depth enough and they're truthful enough. So I kind of feel like one of the things maybe we need to do as people who have kind of zoned in on a revised reality of what's really going on, I think one of the things we need to do is share our stories of how things unraveled for us, and what kind of unraveling may be required for others. I think, to get kind of up to date or break through the illusions. Look, maybe that's just the way to say it. There's just a lot of illusions out there. Another thing that's really important is it's very challenging and difficult to have clarity on all subjects. There's so many ways that we can be misled. I think the one that just keeps coming up. Well, I can think of a couple examples. History is very important, so we can also talk about history. One of the examples is like, and I've done a lot of things with conservatives, and I don't hate conservatives. I hate some politicians who are Republicans, and I switched to the Republican Party myself because of my just total overwhelming disbelief at the level of corruption that was going on among Democrats over the Russiagate situation. But in all truth, the whole Russiagate thing, the whole attempt to knock down Trump over charges that he was colluding with Russia to get votes in the 2016 election. In all truth, it wasn't just the Democrats. The DNC was key, but there were Republicans as well who were anti-Trump and trying to and going after him in this whole Russiagate thing. So, but in reaction to that and many other things, I became Republican. But there's a feed that I'm on, an analyst, and he put out a contest, or he said, okay, now you can attend the assassin or the execution of Lindsey Graham or Mike Pence or Lindsey Graham, but you can only get one ticket. So whose execution will you attend? And on one hand, just the suggestion of this was extremely funny to me. Although if you really think about the deaths, like in Ukraine, and who's been promoting it, I don't know. There's justice in these ideas. But anyway, I thought it was kind of evil to vote, but I ended up not resisting. And of course I voted for Lindsey Graham, and he got 86% of that vote. So 86% of the people who voted thought that they would prefer to attend his execution than to attend Mike Pence's execution. But I think the point is well made that there are some just horrible politicians, and you can find plenty of Republicans, who fit that. Part of this whole discussion, I think another thing to bring into this discussion right now that's really, really important is listening. And I was listening to some guys, talking about Trump, and I think I'm really getting the people who just really can't stand Trump, or who they're never gonna have a different feeling about Trump. I think um, I guess I don't know, and I can't say for sure, but it seems to me that one of the biggest problems with Trump for so many people is, hey, he's rude. Okay, he's rude. Now, before you call him a racist or a bigot, he definitely is rude. And he can say nasty things about people. And it's so odd because there was this town hall, I don't know, a month ago or it wasn't that long ago. There was this town hall with CNN, and there I can't remember who the woman was, but boy was she trying to trip him up, and she was just on him, and he was relaxed and he was sharp. His answers were just spot on. But the way she was hounding him, and at one point he turned to her and he said, "By the way, you are a very nasty person." And from my perspective, that was beautiful when he said that. Well, I laughed. It like gave me relief because she was being super nasty to him. You know, from my son's perspective, it's like you just never say that to anybody publicly. You know, I mean, that's like a taboo for my son. So he didn't even have to watch it, and he didn't want to watch it. My son didn't want to watch it. He's an anti-Trump guy, okay? So I guess I felt so lied to by Obama, so incredibly lied to. He bombed the hell out of Syria, got us in Afghanistan. Oh, wait a minute. Am I confused? No, he kept us in Afghanistan. Bush 2 got us in Afghanistan. Obama kept us in Afghanistan and even escalated that at one point in his presidency. What else did Obama do? Under Obama, we destroyed Libya. The most prosperous country in Africa became one of the most destitute, war-ridden, and human slave dealing countries in Africa. Tragic. And not just for Africa, but for Europe. Both of those wars, Syria, Lebanon, just put an outpouring of refugees. And here's one of the problems with the refugees. Not only is there just such a large number of people from another culture coming into European countries, okay, to a degree that it becomes almost a capacity issue. It becomes at a certain point, after a certain number of them come, it becomes like a management problem. It becomes a cultural problem. It becomes a violence problem. There's all kinds of problems that result from that. You can also send, if you think about from this perspective, and I know a lot of the people who I don't consider to be really on track with what's really going on, might call this conspiracy theory. But very powerful people and very powerful intelligence agencies oftentimes send criminal, terrorist type people amongst the crowds of refugees. Now, that's a much longer discussion as to why that might happen. But that's a concern. You just have a flood of people, and how can you know who these people are? How can you know that they're all decent people who are not there to destroy your country? Okay, so Obama, these two wars, I don't think that's all of it. There was another, what was it, Somalia? You know, Black Hawk Down, wasn't that under, or no, it's not Somalia, it's another African country, well, anyway, I can't remember all the countries. I mean, if you think of all the countries where the U.S. has overthrown governments or gone to war or in some way ravaged broken economies, I mean, they've even, you know, with Biden's help, the Colombia plan. There's just so many ways that we have compromised other countries. Of course, there was Honduras under Biden as well. And you know, there's a whole lot of Central and South America. Just consider, I'm not saying Biden, but I'm saying, you know, think about Panama. Think about Chile. I mean, under Nixon, you know, the decades. Think about Vietnam. I know that's not South and Central America, that's Asia. But if you just think about all the places in the world, and I've just listed a few, where we've killed millions of people to gain resources, gain control, gain power, benefit from labor. I think Sean's sensitive to some of that. So I think there's a potential there. And I mentioned Matt Ehret and you know, the CanadianPatriot.org and his wife Cynthia Chung and all the great books that they've written as a source. And I find their stuff to be sober and have a place for optimism. They still have a place for optimism. They still believe, you know, James Corbett would really criticize them as statists, I believe. And I know people who are much more critical of Lincoln. And I've been one of these people who really thought Lincoln was a really horrible guy. You know, the War of Northern Aggression perspective on the Civil War. But I think Matt and Cynthia have really helped bring me around to see that there was a lot more to Lincoln. And he I don't know if he could have prevented the level of violence or the war itself from happening. And I don't think he did all of that. He handled everything eloquently, but I think he did have some humane fibers. He may have hated Native Americans because they killed his grandfather. They attacked his family. I don't even think he liked blacks, but I think he was adamant against slavery and the economic system of the South. I think what I came to over Lincoln, and you know, I think what I came to is, even though I believed he was simply the war president and simply this was a war of northern aggression, is that the two economic systems I think there was a poisoning in the southern economic system, and you couldn't really separate it from the slavery, even though there were a lot of people in the South who were just poor farmers and didn't even own slaves. They were just white poor farmers. There was an economic system in the South, and they did clash. And I do think that probably a lot of the policies coming from the North favored the North and made it harder on the South. So I think it was a real complex situation where you did have these two economic systems at battle with each other. But I think what I realize is that economic system of the South intrinsically a lot of what it had to do with was the slavery. And because of that, you couldn't separate the two. So for many years, I thought that there was a naive belief that the Civil War was about freeing slaves. And I thought that it was really about economic matters. But now I think that the two are one and the same. Yes, freeing of the slave, we needed to change the economic structure, I would say, of the whole United States. It doesn't mean that there were not some very unfair economic policies against the South, and that non-slave owning Southerners had good reason to have anger towards the North, and it may have thus been motivated. So I'm not saying it was clean. I'm not saying it was all right. But I think another thing about the Civil War, and I think history is very, very important. So we need to question things, and we need to consider breaking our own beliefs, or modifying our own beliefs. On an international level, there was the British Empire that was ruling the seas. And, of course, in the American Revolution, we fought we were one of the colonies of the British Empire, and we fought back, and we gained our independence. And Russia supported us in the Revolutionary War. And Russia also supported us in the Civil War. They supported the North. They supported Lincoln's Union. And the British were not only going to support the South, but they were going to enter the war until Russia threatened them, and Russia put its fleet outside of New York for 7 months and outside of San Francisco. So that was huge. But if you think about what empire is about getting control over everything so that you can siphon goods for next to nothing from countries that you have control over. All right. The whole idea of empire is divide and conquer. Well, the British wanted to do to the United States at the time of the Civil War what the Anglo Empire, which is now led by America, which in my opinion, the leadership of the United States, not the people, but the people have been influenced by the narratives of the leadership and the media of the United States. I think you can find American leaders openly saying they need regime change in Russia and they need to break Russia up and weaken it. Well, that's basically the playbook of any empire. The British Empire wanted to do that to the United States in the Civil War. And they didn't want to just divide it into North and South. They wanted to divide it into pieces. They wanted to divide the United States into pieces, just like the American Empire, with the help of, with the alliance of Europe. And of course, Britain's still there. They're just letting us take the center stage, because they were able to poison our leaders, and to some extent our people, into believing that Russia's a bad guy, because Russia's the biggest competitor, you see. Yeah. So the United States should be the best of friends with Russia. At the time of the Civil War, Russia wanted to defend Alexander II wanted to defend the United States, because Lincoln represented the American way, which was outside of British Empire. It was outside of this. It was more an idea of sovereign nations who conduct trade with each other, conduct sovereign trade with each other, where there's free-flowing economic exchange in the world. So there were plans and visions to build a railroad across the Bering Strait. And that's why Alaska was sold to the U.S. And of course, a lot of the British imperialists and oligarchs, they made fun of Seward, who pushed for us to buy Alaska. So, unfortunately, that hope of nations that got along and did commerce freely with each other and stopped going at war and stopped trying to be imperialistic over each other, that vision was destroyed. But the belief in that has to live on. So part of my hope in going to Russia then is to stay in touch with my family, with my friends here in the U.S. I don't know, maybe to do some on-the-ground reporting, maybe to go to the Donbass. This horrendous war, which from my studied perspective was a provocation in which Russia held off as long as it could until it was obvious that it had to take action. This horrendous war that's being funded by the West only to throw more people into the meat grinder. It's just I don't know. I can never reconcile this situation. But I can understand that Russia sees it as the West using the Ukraine to find a way into Russia and to destroy it. So, from Russia's perspective, it is existential, and it is life or death of the country, Russia. So, so I don't blame Russia in this conflict. I think if we had good leaders who were humane, who cared about people, we would have prevented this war. We would not have provoked. We would not have broken the Minsk agreements. That alone would have. That alone, just following the Minsk agreements, which Ukraine agreed to, Europe agreed to, Russia supported. All that had to be done was the following of the Minsk agreements. Most people haven't read the Minsk agreements. Most people don't know what it is. That alone would have prevented this war. And the agreements were made, they were signed. They just weren't followed. And then Angela Merkel and, of course, Poroshenko before that both admitted that they never intended to follow the Minsk agreements. And of course, when Zelensky once he was elected, he was compromised, he was threatened. Of course, he wanted to stop it, but he played right along. Well, there's a lot of history there in Ukraine, and that's maybe for another time. You just have to dig. There's a much different awareness that needs to be had. What really happened. What I can recommend, though, there's a movie. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Amazon Prime. I think you got to do it with commercials, but it's called Hatred. It's a Polish movie that was made in 2016, and it's historical fiction, but it goes through a lot of the events that took place in Western Ukraine in the at the beginning, just prior to World War II, and then going into World War II, and it's tough. It's bloody. It's not. Most of the mass murdering you see is not from Nazis. It's from people with axes, farm tools. From everything I've read and looked up, it's quite accurate, and I think quite well done. So there's a lot about the world we don't understand, and I think part of the Great Awakening is that you just have to look deeper. You have to be willing to read books, to do research. And of course, again, I would say Matt Ehret it's CanadianPatriot.org. He and his wife, their books are excellent, deeply researched. They're prolific. They've written many books, over a dozen, I believe. And there's a lot of history, a lot of stuff that tells us, that leads up to where we are today in their writings. And it's easy for, I think, people who care to read books like theirs than I think to just scan the internet. I think you can actually just sit down with stuff that's referenced. And I think so much of what we get in the news, they don't give us references. And that's a problem. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. God bless. I love people. I love humanity. I think we do podcasts, hopefully to deal with tough stuff, but find good stuff in the process, inspiration. So may God bless you, and thank you for listening.